up to this point, before the season started, the NFL released a statement around in August or so, right before preseason started, that they were going to make some tweaks to the roughing the passer rule in hope of making it not as common of a call. Because I don't know if you recall last year, they were really flag happy with it last year. And I know that's been kind of lost in the past week, but last year they were calling it a lot. And so the league, granted, took some steps to be like, all right, we're going to try and make some tweaks to it to make sure that it's not called as often. And that was the case for the most part, outside of a really bad call against Josh Allen in the Ravens-Bills game that should not have been flagged. Other than that, it was basically a non-factor in a lot of games this year up to this point. And then week 5 happened. And a lot of this, I theorize, was probably in response to the Tua injury and how scary that was. And I'm still of the belief that he should not have been in that game to begin with. But this really, I feel like, was all the calls we saw and how bad they were, I thought initially was a response to that. Now, if you, for some reason, still haven't seen them, if you're watching this video, then chances are there's not a chance you haven't. But just in case, let me walk you through some of them, because there was three really bad calls over the weekend. The first one that no one's really talking about is in the Chargers game. Hold on, if I can look up his name real quick. So yeah, there was a play in the Chargers-Browns game, which is a game I'll talk about a little later for a different reason, where a Chargers defender it was after the play it was right when Jacoby Brissett, the Browns quarterback, threw the football, and the Chargers defender came up and just sort of like lightly shoved him. He just sort of shoved him a little bit, and then flag comes out, roughing the passer. And that was sort of the first indication of, come on, man. But that one was nowhere near as egregious as the next two we're going to talk about, and the one that everyone was complaining about, mainly because of the name of the quarterback involved, and as well as the name of the referee involved. I'm, of course, talking about Falcons versus Bucks, where, oh boy, it was a game dominated by Tampa up to the, let me give some context for it. It was a game dominated by Tampa up until around the fourth quarter. Then all of a sudden Atlanta started finding their footing offensively. They started making a rally. At one point it got to a situation late in the fourth quarter where all of a sudden the Bucks were only up 21-15. And the Falcons defense needed to make a stand. They needed to get a stop to get the ball back to their offense in hope of maybe tying the game or taking the lead, etc. And it looked like the Falcons were going to get that chance. Grady Jarrett, as great as he is, was able to get into the backfield, and he was able to get to Tom Brady. He was able to get the sack and not turnover, but it was a third down stop, fourth down coming up. All right, now we got something. Now we got a chance for Atlanta to go down and do something. They've been on a roll the entire quarter up to that point. Now all of a sudden this is interesting. Except we never got that chance. We never got a chance to see that because for some unbeknownst reason, Jerome Boger himself, not one of his referees and his crew, Jerome Boger himself threw a flag out, and they were deliberating a little bit, and they came out, and there was the phrase, personal foul, roughing the passer. And now I was watching this on Red Zone. I had just started watching this, from my perspective, on Red Zone right after the Patriots game ended. And then I went onto Red Zone, and that was the first thing I saw. So I didn't see the sack live. I just saw the roughing the passer penalty called live. So I watched the replay thinking, all right, well, what does it look like? Did he like throw him down? Did he like hit him in the head? Did he like do anything egregious after the play? Nope. Nope. It was just a regular wrap up sack, regular gator tackle that you do drills in practice all the time. And there was nothing egregious after the play, nothing egregious during it, before it, nothing. It was just a regular sack. And that completely screwed Atlanta over because it gave them an automatic first 15 yards, and Tampa ran out the clock, and that was the ball game. And a lot of people are saying, like, oh, of course it's Tom Brady. If this was any other quarterback, then that wouldn't have been called. If this was like a mediocre quarterback, this wouldn't have been called. And I was of the belief of that as well. Until we got to Monday night. And this one might actually even be worse. So, Monday night, Raiders-Chiefs in Arrowhead. I think it was like a little around 5 minutes to go in the second quarter, if I'm not mistaken. Raiders are moving, and they're up 17-7 at this point. And the Raiders are moving, and Chiefs defensive tackle Chris Jones, who is a monster, who would be the best defensive tackle in the NFL, if not for a certain 99 down in Los Angeles. He makes an incredible, like one of the most incredible plays I've ever seen. He not only gets to Derek Carr, he not only hits Derek Carr, but in the process of hitting him, strips him, and then tucks it into him, tucks it into his chest while he's sacking him. He hit him, stripped him, recovered it, all in one motion. I've never seen anything like that. It was incredible. And all of a sudden, Kansas City, who just scored a touchdown on the previous drive, now all of a sudden has all the momentum, and it's like, oh boy, here comes the Chiefs. Except, flag comes out, and I was watching this, and I was like, there's no way. Like, I had that feeling in my gut that they were going to call it, but I was like, there's no way they're going to call it. And sure enough, referee says, roughing the passer, once again, and I'm thinking body weight thing. And then I watched the replay, and Chris Jones, because usually in order to keep the body weight from crushing the quarterback, guys put their hands down on the ground to sort of brace themselves. Well, Chris Jones had one hand braced, and he wasn't able to brace the other because he had the fucking football in his hand. So, and Joe Buck in the broadcast he even said it himself, he was like, what is the defender supposed to do? Is he supposed to just disappear? Like, both those plays, Grady Jarrett and Chris Jones, are both plays you look at and you're like, what else is the defender supposed to do? Are they supposed to, like, sing him a lullaby? Are they supposed to, like, two-hand touch them? Like, what are they supposed to do? It doesn't make sense. And thankfully, it was only in the second half. Kansas City would go on to win that game. But that should never have happened. And the crowd in Arrowhead, they let the refs know that was a terrible fucking call. They were booing them for the rest of the first half and well into the second half. Like, they did not stop booing. Every time, like, it felt like the referees were in that game were one bad call away from everybody in that crowd just starting a riot. And I still can't wrap my mind around it. And it's getting to the point where now, in the case of Grady Jarrett and the Falcons, now it was a thing where it's like, all right, you're protecting the quarterbacks a little too much. Now it's getting to the point where it's costing teams games. And you're putting the fate of games into the hand of referees who, to be frank, don't even understand the call themselves. Because later in that game, in the Chiefs game, after the whole Derek Carr thing that was called roughing the passer, later that game, the Chiefs are driving, they got down into a goal-to-go situation. Patrick Mahomes, and this is why I was like, I thought it was to protect certain quarterbacks, not all quarterbacks. That theory was dashed in this play because Patrick Mahomes, who, you would think would be the most protected quarterback protected man in the NFL, he goes back, he drops back in a goal-to-go situation. Linebacker shoots through, sacks him, not only in the same way that Grady Jarrett sacked Tom Brady the day before, he sacked Mahomes the same exact way, the same exact force that Tua was sacked that caused him to have that scary injury. So that situation happens. No laundry. No substance of yellow anywhere on the field. There's no consistency. It does not make sense. And that goes to show that the referees don't even understand what counts as roughing the passer and what doesn't. Because the rule is written in such a vague way that it's impossible to understand it. And it's getting to the point where it's ruining the sport. And I don't say that lightly. I know that might sound as an overreaction, but it's getting to the point where it's like, it's ruining the sport. It's ruining the enjoyment. Like, after I saw that Grady Jarrett sack, I was upset for the rest of that day, damn near. Because it was such a bad call that it legitimately pissed me off. And the worst part about, here's the thing. The worst part about all this is that not only did the refs make a bad call, but both times after the game, both referees doubled down on it. Because usually when a bad call is made, the refs, sometimes if it's a really, really bad call, in the case of this, they'll say, hey, yep, I saw it this way, but looking back on it, it wasn't the right call. Hell, the NFL did that themselves a few years ago. Well, we all remember the Rams-Saints NFC title game where that pass interference that didn't get called, it was egregious pass interference, didn't get called, and the league said, and the referees themselves came out and said, we screwed up. No. In this case, Jerome Boger, as a matter of fact, I'll read out the statement. I'll read out the transcript. So after the game, after the whole Grady Jarrett thing, the referee in that game, Jerome Boger, was interviewed after the game, and here's how it went. I have the transcript right here. I'll put it on the screen as well. The transcript reads, there was a third down penalty where the Falcons had a roughing the passer called after sacking Tom Brady that extended the drive. Just looking for clarification on what constituted that roughing the passer. Boger proceeded to answer it with, what I had was a defender grab the quarterback while he was still in the pocket and unnecessarily throwing him to the ground. That is what I was making the decision based upon. So the interviewer, who was probably just as confused by that statement as I and you probably are, then asked the play, he was probably thinking the same thing of, all right, this is probably in response to the Tua thing because it was kind of similar to that. So the interviewer asked, that play was similar to the play that injured Miami's quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. Is that something you have made a specific measure to try and watch out for, the takedowns on the quarterbacks like that? And Boger responds, no, not necessarily. And that is a problem. It doesn't even correlate to the Tua thing in the eyes of Jerome Boger. I'm trying to compose myself here. I'm trying. I really, really am. This has gone too far. I get player safety. I get protecting the quarterbacks. I get not wanting the golden gooses of the league to be out and get injured for a significant period of time. But there's a difference between protecting the quarterback and babying the quarterback. These situations are them babying the quarterback. This is them telling defenders, do not harm them. They're men, but they're also just children. That's basically what it is. Like, you don't harm them, They're just delicate beings that they don't know how to take pain, okay? They're football players. They're grown-ass men, they're football players. They can take a hit every now and then. I'm trying so hard to find the words to fully express how I feel, other than it's getting to the point where, like I said earlier, it's ruining the game, and it needs to be reviewable. At bare minimum, it needs to at least be reviewable. And I know the whole thing of the pass interference play a few years back where pass interference was reviewable. Here's the difference. That one was, coaches had to throw the challenge flag on that, and that slowed the game down tremendously, and it was a waste of time. Here, you don't need to do that. You know why? Because they have this system called the Hawkeye system, where they have the station down in New York where, like if a situation, like you all saw probably watching a game where a fumble happens in a game and you're thinking, yeah, we got a fumble on defense. And then all of a sudden they come back and the offense is still out there. And you're like, why? You know why? Because New York was in the referee's ear to look at that immediately after the play was over and say, no, his knee was down. That wasn't a fumble. Take that off. It's a way to make corrections mid-game and to speed up the process. They do that during fights as well, where if the referee doesn't see who instigated it or who was throwing punches, New York can look at that and be like, all right, this guy threw a punch, this guy started it, this guy was in it, and you could chalk and you can toss them out. All right. Why isn't roughing the passer one of those rules or one of those calls that New York can have a say in? Why isn't pass interference another one? Actually, I don't even know if pass interference is one of them that New York can buzz in and be like, nope, that's the wrong call, pick up the flag. And if it is, then it's really no excuse for roughing the passer to not be one of those things. So that's all I'm saying. It needs to be changed really immediately. They're not going to. I don't know why, but I just hope to the head. I mean, they've already said that the competition committee is going to look at it at the end of the season. But if stuff like this continues where we just keep getting bad call after bad call, then it's something that needs to be made, a change that needs to be made immediately. And I'm hoping to the head, God forbid if something like this happened in the postseason or even the Super Bowl. You imagine if that Grady Jarrett sack happened in the Super Bowl? Oh my God, all hell would have broke loose. All hell would have broke loose. So I hope for the sake of the league that doesn't end up happening, which is why I wish they would just grow a pair of balls and do it and make a change now. But we're not going to get that because, the NFL doesn't like doing things that make sense and all that stuff. But